Hi, everybody. We're here live with Catherine and Jaden. Ella's upstairs cleaning her room.
Great.
And you want to tell everybody where you're getting to go tomorrow?
Laser down.
That's right. They're going to play laser tag all day long.
4 hours.
So, Jaden is doing an interesting topic today for school. So, let's talk about that. Fires.
Fire safety.
I know we did a fire. So,
Fire safety.
what do you do if you're home alone? You smell some smoke. You're sitting in the living room, you're chilling, you're watching Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny.
You smell some smoke. Your water heater has caught fire, and nobody's home. And now the smoke's getting worse. I'll tell you a story that happened to me. When I was about 14, I knocked on my friend's door in Philadelphia, and nobody answered. And I saw smoke, black smoke, at the windows. And I'm like, what in the world? So I noticed one of the windows were cracked. So I opened it and I jumped in. The house was filled with smoke. I didn't see any flames, but it was really, really dark. So I followed the darkness and it led me to the kitchen. And I'm yelling, is anybody home? And nobody was home. And it got really, really darker as I got to the kitchen. And I saw where the smoke was coming from. Who wants to guess where? Not the microwave. Oven. Very good. I saw tons of black smoke filtering out of the oven. So I pulled the handle down. You know, that house could have blew up. You know, I never got enough credit for saving his house. I pulled the handle down on the oven, and there was a piece of meat in the oven. He was cooking. He forgot about it, left it there. And back in the day, the ovens didn't shut off. So I pulled down the handle of this oven, and all this black smoke came out. And my friend was cooking and left it in there, and it was so black and it was horrible, and I could barely breathe, and I shut the oven off, and I basically saved my friend's house. So I want to know from you guys, what would you do in a situation you're home by yourself and now you know there's a fire in the house? What do we do?
Stuff.
What do we do? There's a fire in the house. You could get to safety. Let's say that it's downstairs in the basement and you're upstairs. You really smell smoke. Do you take your chances? Do you go down? Do you really go downstairs and try to be the hero?
No.
Who would try to be the hero and venture down into the basement? Tons of smoke's coming up the stairs.
To save everybody's house.
I mean, really, it depends on the situation. It really depends on the situation. So, what I did at my friend's house when I saw that tons of smoke, I really put my life at risk. I really did. Oh, who's this? Hi, Brooklyn. How are you? Hi, Brooklyn. Brooklyn, we're discussing fires. Were you ever had to deal with a house fire at all?
We had to deal with a flood.
Oh, yeah, that's another good video we could do. We had a major flood, but this house, this is a fire discussion.
Right there.
So, see that window right there? That window was completely filled with water.
And a frog.
That's for our flood video.
And a frog.
And Jaden was sitting right where I am. He was playing Xbox. But I don't want to ruin that video. This is a fire. This is fire time. So, what do? You're sitting there watching TV. Nobody's home. Mom says she'll be home from work in an hour.
In an hour? Jeez.
And now your house, you smell smoke. fire, a real one.
You say
Let's say your water heater, the pilot, something happened, and now there's smoke, and now you really know something's wrong in the basement. What would you do, Pippa? What would be your first thought?
where are those thingies?
Do you go down? Do you go down and put the fire out? Do you go down with water?
No,
Maybe a
you-
blanket?
The thingies that you thingy.
What are the thingies?
Do you want me to bring it down? Because I don't want one
A fire
Yes.
extinguisher.
of those. Yes.
Have you ever used a fire extinguisher? How many people out there, Brooklyn, do you have a fire extinguisher in your house? Comment. Text me if you do, if anybody does out there. So, yes, we have a couple fire extinguishers, and guess what?
One in your room.
I never used it before, and I know my kids haven't. And we have like 2 or 3 of them, and we don't know how to use them. So, what good is that doing us?
Nothing.
It's not. We are going to have a family fire safety night, and we're going to learn how to use that. Oh, you think you have one, Brooklyn?
Go ask
So-
your mom and dad.
That's a good idea. Brooke, you should tell your mom and dad, we need to have a fire before it's too late. I want to know how to use the fire extinguisher. Now, if we had trained ourselves and we found the fire extinguisher, then maybe Pippa could get a little risky and go downstairs. I guess if you inch your way down and you can see whether or not you could put the fire out. Now, if it's a blaze,
No.
get out. But if it's smoke, you should have smoke alarms. Your smoke alarms are probably going to be going off.
Oh, we have a smoke alarm.
Yeah, we got smoke alarms, so they would go off.
think
I
we
would
have
say
something.
go down and take a peek and see how bad it is.
If it's really bad, don't go.
You're going to have to use a judgment call. If you have a phone accessible and one of your parents, it's not a big deal to call them. I would say, obviously, if you smell any smoke and you can get to a phone, go call mom or dad right away. Now, one thing I have set up on my phone in my office
I use it a lot.
is a push dial. So the kids know they can go into my office and they can push. There's 2 buttons and it says right on the screen of the phone, call daddy's cell, call mommy's cell. So ask your parents to set something like that up. Really fun.
Well,
Okay, now we're going to take a break from safety talk. We got to talk about my favorite subject, Descendants. So Descendants is almost here, guys. Descendants 3.
it's not the summer yet.
Descendants 3 is coming out in July.
No, it's coming out in the summer.
That's July's in the summer.
It's-
Mal, Evie, they're all going to return.
Except for Carlos. Carlos is a different guy.
Oh, Carlos is, we got a different Carlos. It's just not going to be the same without Carlos. No. I'm very anxious to see Descendants 3.
Me too. I
And,
need
oh, Brooklyn knows Descendants.
to-
And I hope that Jay and Lonnie hook up. They would make the greatest couple.
But like they come from different countries.
So it's because you're from a different country doesn't mean you can't be boyfriend girlfriend. They should have. Jay and Lonnie would have been the perfect ideal couple. They both fight. They're both warriors. They look like each other. Who thinks Jay and Lonnie look like each other? Yeah, I do too. So I'm 48 years old, so I've seen a lot of movies in my lifetime. And when I grew up in the 1970s, and I was a teenager in the 80s. And we had a lot of awesome movies. In fact, my kids love watching the 1980 movies
Oh,
with me.
I like
Up,
mm,
Big.
I like the Mask and
The Mask was in the 90s.
what was?
Big.
I don't know.
We watched it outside with Micah,
I don't remember that.
and the little boy put a quarter in the Zoltar, and he turned into a big person.
Oh, I like
You remember that?
movie. Yeah. What's the one with
So for you
What's
guys
that
who
guy?
are over 14, you can watch Big.
Daddy? Daddy, what's that movie with the guy who eats mice?
He eats mice. Oh, Shrek. Shrek?
Yeah, I do like Shrek, but it's the weird guy.
The weird guy that eats mice.
The brown people, the brown family.
The Brown family eats mice.
No, not the brown family, but one of the guys that are in the family doesn't eats mice.
Jada, do you know what she's talking about? Is it a TV show, a movie? What is it?
It's a TV show you watched.
I watch it. And he eats mice.
Urkel.
Urkel eats mice?
Yeah, in the movie.
When did he ever eat mice?
In the movie, they never show you, but they talked about that he eats mice in the movie.
I've never heard of that.
Like in the movie, not in real life.
So if you know Steve Urkel, somebody comment out there. Who knows who Steve Urkel? One of the greatest TV characters
He's really funny.
ever.
And he talks like this.
Catherine's looking at me because I did a good impression of him. Who knows Steve Urkel from Family Matters? So my kids love watching all my old shows because I'm going to tell you, I grew up with the greatest TV time, which was the 1980s. I mean, you just couldn't get better. Saved by the Bell,
Oh.
Karate Kid, all your great shows. In the 70s had some good ones. What's Happening? You guys probably didn't see What's Happening in the 70s. Sanford and Son, Three's Company, Archie Bunker, all the greatest. The greatest comedies were all sitcoms.
Oh, what's that girl I was
They were all in the
watching on
70s.
YouTube? What's that girl I was watching on YouTube?
Colin Sav. Who out there
No,
watches Colin Sav?
House something, not Fuller House. Full House.
Full House. What an incredible show. Full House. Oh, Brooke does? Brooklyn? Brooklyn, do you know? Name somebody on Full House. Name some characters. Who knows? Try to name all the characters.
Oh, I haven't.
Who's the uncle?
I remember it, but I don't remember their names.
Jaden. Who's the uncle? Let's zoom in on Jaden.
Uncle what?
Oh, look who's here.
Full House.
I didn't.
Ella, we're talking about TV.
Full House.
TV shows. Name as many Full House characters as you can. Ella's got great hair. She's got the Bon Jovi thing going on.
Who's Bon Jovi?
Who's Bon Jovi?
I've heard the
when-
name before. I don't know who he
So
is.
when I was in 8th grade, I asked a girl, I said, who do you listen to? Music? And she's like, oh, you probably never heard him. It's Bon Jovi. He's brand new. And now he's a superstar, world famous.
Hey, that's mine. I'll look at that.
That's Bon Jovi's alive. That's when you know you're getting old. When people start asking you, like, are the people you watch alive? That's when you know you're starting to get old. Like, my mom watches all these movies. They're all dead. All the people are dead. I got to ask her constantly, is this person alive? Is that person alive?
Like, the superhero movie that Grandma likes.
So I'm here to give you guys
like Inhuman.
I'm here to give you some good
Here, I
movie
untangled
tips.
these. I untangled
Oh,
them.
thank you.
Oh, man.
Movies. I'm going to tell you the greatest movies out there. Number one,
Greatest Showman. The
Star
Mask.
Wars,
What? Greatest
the
Showman.
original. Star Wars.
Greatest Showman.
No, the movies I grew up with killed those.
The
I
Mask.
want to see, Dad, he won't let me see Star Wars.
Star Wars and the next one. Okay, they took the world by storm. They took the world by storm. Star Wars with Han Solo. I was 5 years old when it came out, and I was so obsessed and enthralled and enraptured with it. I went out and bought every little doll. Every kid in the world did. They put all the. I mean, it's just people go and do yourself a favor. If you have not seen Star Wars now, I'm going to warn you, it gets scary with Darth Vader.
Isn't there like a?
If-
Doesn't he lose his arm and he's?
I would be
hanging
10
off
years
the
old,
cliff?
10 years old or older to watch that. You know, I don't want to give the movie away. Star Wars, phenomenal.
I've just seen clips.
Phenomenal.
But now
Me too.
remember, I grew up in the 1970s. Let's start naming things that weren't out in the 1970s.
The mask. Oh, that was.
What kind of electronics or technology wasn't invented yet?
Computer? No, computers. were
Computers were made, but they weren't a household item. You never saw one in
No,
somebody's
they
house.
were-
They're only at like offices and stuff.
Yeah,
TV?
you would see it at an office, but not at everybody's desk. So there'd be dedicated computers that everybody would share. Not like today. Today, there's a computer at everyone's desk. What else back in the 1970s hasn't come out yet? You know, I really feel privileged and honored that I grew up and I got to experience a lot of things that were new. I was around when there was the old school telephones. I got to watch all the telephones evolve. You guys didn't. Did
I
you
did
know
computers.
when you used to walk around the streets with your friends? Do you know what the big thing was to make a phone call?
Nope.
Like everywhere that there was a store, there usually was a little telephone on the side of a wall or something. And if you wanted to call somebody, your mom or your dad, I mean, there were no cell phones. You had to have a dime. A dime was the big key. Everybody carried dimes with them because if you wanted to talk to your parents, you had to do a dime.
Why would you want to talk with your parents?
Like you had to call your mom, I'm going to so and so's house, you know, that type of thing. You'd have to stop, find one of these phones, and they had them all over. And then they got greedy. I remember when they raised them to $0.25 a phone call. Now, if you didn't have money, there was another option. Who knows how you would make a phone call? You're at one of these phones. How would you make a phone call? And I'm not talking about Matthew Broderick and War Games where you take out the green wire and tap it to the chassis and get a dial tone. I'm not talking about that. There was another way, if you didn't have any money, that you could make a phone call to your parents.
Debt.
You dial 0. And the operator will come on. And you say, operator, I'd like to make a...
Phone call?
Anybody know what kind of phone call?
Emergency?
Let's see if anybody out there knows. Anyone?
Regular phone call.
Collect.
A collector's phone.
I'd like to make a collect
Collector's-
call.
A collector's edition.
And what the operator will say is, okay, give me the phone number. So then you would give them your home phone number. Now here's how it worked. You didn't have any money. The operator will connect you.
Why wouldn't you have a dime?
Let's say you don't have a dime, but you really need to talk to your mom. The operator will connect you. You have to say, I want to make a collect call. The other person has to pick up. Before the operator will let you speak, you can actually listen in on this too. It's really cool. Because we used to do little tricks to get free phone calls. The operator will ask your mom or dad, you have a collect call from little Joey Booba. Would you like to accept?
Would you like-
Now you're listening in as this happens. So the mother or the father could accept or decline. If they accept, the operator will connect the call and they will charge
Come here, dear sweetheart.
their phone bill. They will charge them like 50 cents or $1 for that call. So it was expensive to make a collect call. It's very famous for people in jail. You know how jail cells have one phone for the whole jail?
And then
And
you
people
can
would fight
call-
in line for it. Well, everybody would be making collect calls. They didn't have money in jail. So, very popular back then. You heard collect call, you usually think it's somebody from prison. But what we used to do to get around that is we would have a little code word where I would tell my brother or somebody, answer the phone, and then use a code phrase with the operator, and I can listen in, and if you said the code phrase, I would know my answer. So we didn't have to pay for the collect call, and then he would just decline it after he said our secret phrase for whatever I was calling for. Like, could I stay at so-and-so's house, or do I have to come right home? So we had phrases.
Like secret codes.
Would you like to make a collect call? Like, no, I have to fix my lemon tree. No. So we would hear that phrase, and then I would got my answer. Oh, okay, mom wants me right home, type of thing. So we had, and then we would just tell the operator, no, we don't want to collect call, and nobody would have to. And I got my answer, whether I had to come home or not. So there was ways to use the system to get free phone calls. Telephones was a big one. I watched those evolve from the Greg Brady. See, everybody had to have a wire plugged in on your phone. Landline. Back then, you had one wire, and the worst part was there was no call waiting. Oh. If you watch the Brady Bunch, you'll see the episode where they all fought over the phone because if one person was on the phone, there you couldn't get a second call. There was no such thing as call waiting back then. So you watch the Brady Bunch. They had one call, and Marsha would talk, and then Greg would talk to his girlfriend, and they got to the point where they had to bring in a second phone. Well, not nowadays. Nowadays they have what's called call waiting. If you were, and I remember when that finally came out. I think it was the early '80s. And you're talking on the phone, and it was beautiful. You'd hear, doot doot, and then you knew another call was coming in. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. Call waiting. You had to pay like an extra $5 or $10 a month, and everybody had to get it. It was just, it's like having a cell phone. You just had to get call waiting. Then the big thing that came out, three-way calling. There was the next big phone thing to come out. You're talking with your buddy. You want to call a friend and merge them in. You could do a three-way call. Again, that was more money. Lots of money to pay for these features, but they were all awesome features. And then came star 69. Star 69. You want to see who called you and pranked you? When they hang up, pick up the phone. Dial star 69. I think it's still in use today, but everybody has caller ID, so it doesn't matter. Back then, I never forget because I got busted. I called this girl that I liked. She answered. I hung up. My phone rings right back. This must have been about 1983. And I'm like, why are you calling me? She's like, you just called me. I said, no, I didn't. She said, yeah, you did. I said, how do you know it was me? Have you heard of star 69? What's that? Well, you dial it and it tells you the last person that called you, and your number came up. And I was so busted. I felt so stupid. I still insisted. I tried to play it off, but yeah, I was roasted. Star 69. That was the big one. So that was the phone. And then, all of a sudden, in the middle 80s, this weird thing called the internet? What the heck is this? America Online. Oh, there was only one really internet service, AOL. Still in existence today. But when we heard about this, we were like, what is this all about? We go to a friend's house who was rich, who had a computer, and he showed me AOL. I'm like, this is wild. He's like, look at all the people in these chat rooms. Now, there was no video technology out, and you really couldn't send videos back then. Now, the thing that stunk about getting a computer to get America Online is that you had to use your telephone line. So you would dial up you'd hear, "Eh." You hear all that. Well, that is just like a fax call today, what fax machines use. But then you were dialing up to America Online, the internet. And it stunk because every single time you were on the internet, nobody could call your house. Nobody could call. So now people were forced to buy another phone line, which is like $20 a month, plus pay for your internet another 20 a month, plus pay 85 to have the phone line installed. It stunk. And then if you were too cheap to get a second line dedicated for the computer, every time somebody had to make a phone call, you had to sign off.
Yeah. Sign off. I have to call your brother.
What a pain in the neck that was. The internet typical cost, I think, was $14.99 a month for dial-up. It was so brutally slow. It literally would take you probably 5 to 7 hours to download one 2-minute song. Maybe longer. So it was all text. If you wanted to send a picture to somebody, they were waiting 6 hours for one little picture because the speeds were so brutally slow. But the whole entire world was going on this America Online. It exploded in the mid 80s, and I was there for it all. I was a young teen. I got to watch it all evolve into what it is today. Absolutely incredible. If I only would have known. People got very, very rich because they started to realize that businesses were going to start using these .coms. And what smart people were doing is they were buying McDonald's.com and Sony.com and all the big businesses, Walmart.com. And they were buying them because they knew that these businesses sooner or later were going to want their own website. This is when it just started coming out. And people were telling me, and nobody bought into it, but the people that bought those names, they were allowed to keep them and then sell them to McDonald's for thousands and thousands of dollars. Genius. And I didn't cash in on it. Should have. So, there's life in the 80s. It was just an amazing, unbelievable time. Technology evolved right in front of my eyes. And I feel really fortunate to watch telephones go from... I mean, you don't even see them on the street any now. When's the last time you saw a telephone booth?
In London.
Right. I mean, it's so rare. They were everywhere back in the early 80s, 70s.
While you're teleporting, there's a telephone booth.
Now, they
Feel
did.
it. This is
Sometimes
really
they had a
hot.
booth where if it was raining, you could go in there.
Feel this, it's like the plastic part's really hot.
You saw the TV shows where the telephone booth, you could shut the door. Those were really nice if you had to have a conversation. But most of the time, they were just hanging off of a wall. And then you could put your quarter or your dime in. You got so many minutes to talk. Or you had to put more money in, like a nickel. But watch the movie War Games. If you have not seen War Games, it was really the first technological movie out there. Matthew Broderick, who played Ferris Bueller, he is a teenage boy who is a genius with computers, and he became a hacker.
Wait, was this the one where they hacked
The government.
Yeah.
They hacked the government,
During,
and
like, war thing?
and he decides to play this game. Stephen Falcon was the computer genius who developed Joshua, which was his son's name, who died. So he named this computer after his son, Joshua. And he designed games like chess. And one of the games was thermonuclear war. So when Matthew Broderick hacked into the government, he got into Joshua. And he decided to play. Well, what he didn't know is that it was really going to launch rockets with Russia. So Matthew Broderick started a nuclear war between us and Russia. That's another thing you guys don't know, and the millennials today. So in the 1980s, the United States, for whatever reason, became enemies with Russia. Russia was just the enemy. I remember when the Philadelphia Flyers had a exhibition game with Russia, the Russians left the ice because the Flyers were pounding them so hard, they left. I mean, that just began this rivalry between Russia and the United States. If you watch the movie Rocky IV, notice that Ivan Drago, who was not Russian, by the way, he was Swedish, Dolph Lundgren, they made him Russian, and they made him a cheater. They had him kill Apollo, they had him take drugs, they had him punching after the bell.
Wait,
And
what about the one in Saved by the Bell where the guy was Russian? Did that
oh,
have anything to do
Screech,
with it?
Screech and the Russian. Well, the Russians were famous for being great chess players, so that was kind of different. But in the 80s, there was this big thing about nuclear bombs and wars and us and Russia, and everybody thought the world was going to blow up and that the Russians were going to set off nuclear bombs, and we hated them and they hated us. And you watch
Does it still go on?
well, it's not us versus Russia, no. But back then it was really bad. That's why if you watch the movie Rocky IV, that's why Sylvester Stallone made that movie, because at the end Rocky gives a good speech after the fight and says, "If I could change, and you could change, we all could change."
Sounds like Elvis Presley.
Yeah, it was right in the heart of the whole Russia-United States thing. So that was a big thing. Russia and the United States in the mid-'80s. That's gone, though. It's not like that anymore with us and Russia. I think we're friends, allies, whatever. It was just an incredible, incredible time to grow up, to watch computers, America Online, who was just so addicting. What a time the 80s was. The greatest TV shows. Movies just kept getting more and more advanced with graphics. I remember the first
CGI.
animated arcade games. Oh, talk about, I mean, arcade games were phenomenal in the 70s. 70s, early 80s, you had Pac-Man, Asteroids. You go to wherever, you go to the store with your mom, and while she shops, you were just, every kid was at the arcade game. You know, a store would have one or two. And you're playing. The great thing about arcade games back then is that if the better you got, you could last longer on one quarter. It was always a quarter. And it wasn't till the mid-'80s, early 80s, they started to get greedy. And I'll never forget when they finally doubled the price to 50 cents a game. That's when arcade games went down the tubes. Arcades were like the biggest, most
I could pay for that.
popular. You go to a mall now, nobody even thinks about going to the arcade. They're $1 a game. Who can afford that?
I can.
It's ridiculous. No, you can't. You're broke.
I have, you're supposed to
can't.
pay me $99.
When you go into the shopping store with your mother, you don't look for the game on the side that you could put a quarter in and play for an hour on one quarter. You could do that back then. If you were that good, and it was a beautiful thing. But then all of a sudden they got greedy, and I'll never forget when they upped it to 50 cents. You know what was cool? In my dad's mall where he cut hair, he became friends with the arcade guy because the hair was right across from the arcade. And I'll never forget when him and his wife took me and Steve Bird, your uncle, said, "Guys, we have a treat for you." We go into this dark room, and this guy hits the lights, and 50 arcade games just lit up like it was Christmas. And we were all by ourselves, and he's like, "Guys, here's unlimited quarters." He gave us each like a bag of quarters. He said, "Just play. Play whatever you want to play." And me and Steve Bird went crazy. Ask your uncle about that, guys. The guy's name was Carl. I'll never forget because he fixed my computer for me dirt cheap. Carl. Oh, that night in the arcade was amazing. Arcades were huge, huge.
We're going to an arcade.
You go to Wawa, you get $5 and you're set for the entire night. You were just set. I remember going to Wawa, the greatest games. So guys, go and get these games. They're all the retro games are coming back, like Atari, Scramble. Go and get all those retro games because they are so amazing compared to today's games. It's not even close.
Skylander time. Can we do like a Skylander time every? Is this a live stream?
Yes.
Roblox isn't just one game,
How about
though.
every live stream we do a Skylander time?
But when you play Pac-Man and Scramble, Yar Kung Fu, oh man, these games, you were just so obsessed and into them. But you had to go find them somewhere at a
Who has
drugstore.
that one?
I do. You get.
It was all so amazing, and it all went away. It went away. I'll never forget when Atari came out. I must have been about 10 years old. We were blown away that we could play games in our house. Ella, excuse me. Is there hurting going on here?
She tickled me.
I did not.
Yeah.
So anyway, everybody, great discussion. I hope you guys got a lot out. Comment down below. Let me know what games your parents played that you knew about. Your parents growing up, things
Yeah,
that you
this one?
remember.
Sure.
I'd like to hear about
I
it.
want it.
Thanks, everybody.